Another couple of elements to the budget that the opposition was trying to foster. One was the broken promises issue, because that dovetails with the company tax being withdrawn, the cut being withdrawn, and then foreign aid was the other issue. Let's hear now from Tim Costello and Bob Carp.
We estimate that this will cost something like 200,000 lives a year. For it to be pushed out again, it's like, how can Australia, that escaped the global financial crisis, justify it? That'll be the question in international ranks.
You can't spend money you haven't got, and with revenues down, you've got to have savings. You can't spend money you haven't got on aid or anything else, but it is still going up. The aid budget is going up, only it's not going up as dramatically as we had hoped a few years ago.
So that's not a bad defence, but does the broken promises thing still fly because the government's got a bit of a record?
Well, it might fly. I've got to say it's a bit red hot, though. I mean, the company tax cuts, it's a bit rich for the opposition to say it's a broken promise when they were opposing.
They wouldn't allow them to keep the promise.
And on foreign aid, Barnaby Joyce was out there saying it should be cut back. So they're treading a narrow path of rhetoric on that one themselves.
The foreign aid thing, how will that go over within the Labor Party? Because it's there was a lot of excitement when they did sign up to that guaranteed increase.
Well, I think people within the Labor Party are likely to be sort of privately disappointed, but they're fighting for their survival at the moment, and if it requires the foreign aid target being pushed back by 1 year, I think ultimately they're going to wear that one.
The other one that Tony Abbott put a lot of store into, and so did Joe Hockey, was the increase of $50 billion on the credit card. What's the reality behind that?
The reality is that the bond markets are pretty relaxed about it. The argument is that because of the lumpiness of government payments, you get a big surge of rollover of government debt, which requires you to have an extra bit of space to roll over your treasury bonds and treasury notes. They're not all that agitated about it. It looks bad on paper, but it's something that regularly happens, and it doesn't actually mean you actually continue with those high levels of debt.
Australia's net debt is 7% of GDP. You know, most other countries are 10 times that. I really think this debt crisis line doesn't fly.
And in the end, Nikki, they settled on the big issue anyway, the one that they think is the most politically powerful argument, and that is the class warfare thing, aided and abetted, of course, with a lot of support from the Telegraph in Sydney.
Yes, well, when the Telegraph comes out defending people on the North Shore, I think, you should realise you're in trouble. I think it was a mistake on Gillard's part to launch that. It invited all that kind of criticism, I think. And it gave Abbott an opportunity too, in his budget in reply speech, to counter it, to talk about his kind of values versus her kind of values. And I think all round it was just a general...
But you say that it invited the media to do it, but when Tony Abbott suggested that people aren't responsible, you give them welfare and they'll end up gambling it or something, that equally could have been page one treatment, and they could have gone out to Parramatta and spoken to people and said, this is what Tony Abbott thinks that you're capable of.
Well,
It didn't happen that way.
No, it didn't, because, Gillard identified a section of Sydney that the Telegraph felt it, had to come out and defend.
But I thought they were out there looking after the battlers in Parramatta.
There seemed to be kind of a reversal of arguments here. I remember when the baby bonus was introduced, we had all these arguments from the Labor side about how, there are all these single mums...
That's different. That just is different.
Well, a rose is a rose.
the whole class warfare thing, I mean, they both, whoever started it, they were both engaged in it. Julia Gillard probably did make an unwise throwaway line about the North Shore.
Well, it wasn't
throwaway. No, I agree.
It was quite deliberate, and she kept going back to it.
I think the deliberate argument was billionaires versus battlers. That was the scripted line. The North Shore line, whether throwaway or not, was clearly unwise, and they're not saying it anymore, so that would probably tell you something. But the point I wanted to make is that on both sides, this has clearly got nothing to do with the actual budget, because the coalition is voting for every measure, we think, in the actual budget other than the school kids bonus. So they clearly don't think the budget is a class warfare budget because they're voting for it.
And this is, as Alex Buzo would say, it's deja vu all over again because we forget
what they did last year.
what they happened last year.
Yeah.
Last year, the big debate was about whether people who are on $150,000 a year were rich or not.
Yeah.
And we had all of these debates, and then the coalition was talking about the politics of envy, and then they very quietly lined up and voted for all the measures anyway.